Welcome to CrossLife University, and this is the leadership class. Now, at CrossLife University, we want you to become a better disciple and a better leader. We have a lot of classes about discipleship, Old Testament survey, New Testament survey, theology classes, but this class is designed to teach you to become a better leader. And that's very important because we all lead something. Now, in the weeks ahead, we're going to be looking at modeling the way of leadership, principles for handling problems, our attitude as a leader, equipping others for leadership, inspiring a shared vision, and then finally, the price you pay, determining the potential that you realize as a leader. Now, before we get into lesson one, what I want you to do is download the curriculum. I've discovered in every leadership class I have ever taught, one of the crucial things is downloading the curriculum, looking at the curriculum, filling in the blanks as you go. As they say, you forget 95% of the things that you hear. But when you hear them and write them down, it multiplies that retention 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 times. So download the curriculum. In fact, why don't you just go ahead and pause this for just a few moments, look at your screen, and you'll find the place you can go to download the curriculum. You do that, and we'll come back and talk. All right, now let's look at lesson one. What is spiritual leadership? Well, let me define my terms before I really get into this very heavily. And that is, there are 3 things that we think about when we think about leadership in the church. We think about ministry, a minister, a manager, and a leader. Now, a minister is one who personally meets the needs of other people. It could be a pastor, could be a deacon, could be a Sunday school leader, or just someone in your class that you're ministering to, you're counseling with. This is the person who works well with people. Now, a manager, on the other hand, is one who is an administrator, in a sense. He administrates the ministries of other people. He's the person who helps others work better. For example, you have someone on staff that is in administration, maybe in charge of finances, and he comes alongside everybody else to help them manage their resources in order to maximize the ministry in their ministry. Then there's the leader, the one who influences the ministers and the managers. Now, it's the person who develops better people to lead or better people to work. And now I want to ask you a question, and that is, where would you really stand on leadership? If we had a 1 to 10 scale, 1 to 10 scale, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10, and we'll just say the ones down here at the bottom can't lead at all. In fact, if I can just say this in a church, they're the people who come that really at this point in their life, they have a lot of needs. And the 1, 2s, and 3s, they have a lot of needs in their life. They're going through things in their life, and they're the ones that need ministering to. Now, on the top end of the scale, a 10 leader, a person who really maybe has a great business, a great big church. They minister and they lead a great many people. Where are you in that scale? Now, keep in mind that you can really give a good test on whether you're a leader or not. And the old saying is, you look behind you, and if there's nobody following you, chances are you're not leading. And so on a 1 to 10 scale, you might say, well, I'm a 6. I think I'm a 6. I'm a pretty good leader. I've got people around me. I lead people. I answer people at work, but also lead people at work. And, will this course make me a better leader? Well, in surveys and studies done, at least in the past, it's been shown that everybody can improve themselves about 2 steps. And sometimes I think more, maybe 3, in any field that you have. For example, I am not a swimmer. In fact, me swimming is staying alive in the water. I could probably go at my age, maybe 50 yards before I start sucking water. And so you say to yourself, well, you'll never be a great swimmer. In fact, I can tell you, even in my youngest days, 18, 20, 22 years old, I would have never been an Olympic swimmer. But if I would have taken lessons, which I never did, if I'd have taken lessons, worked at it, been in the water every day, I could have improved myself probably to being an average swimmer. And so we're not going to be great at everything. Some of you are natural leaders. You have that spiritual gift in your life. Maybe you haven't developed it, but you have the spiritual gift. Others are kind of in the middle or toward the bottom end of it, but everyone can improve themselves, not just in this study, but you'll have to do some studies in the future. You can improve yourself 2 and maybe 3 steps in anything. And so my goal for you during this series of lessons, if you can take what we have, what we're going to be teaching you in this curriculum, and not only just go through the class, but apply it in your life, you are going to improve at least a step in your leadership. That's my goal for you. And so as we look at this, we first of all kind of look maybe at what leadership really is. Leadership has been defined as influence. In other words, you are influencing people to go a certain direction. It's also been said many, many times, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I found that to really be true. Now, it's true that God's leadership comes first. Everything rises and falls on his leadership. But you look in the Bible and you will find out that he used leaders to influence people. Every time, for example, the nation of Israel, once they divided up and they had 2 different nations, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom had 20 kings or 18 kings, and none of them were good. None of them were godly. And God never blessed the nation of what they call Israel once everything got split up. The nation of Judah, however, had 20 kings. 8 of them were good. And every time there was a good king, he led the people in the right way, and God blessed the nation. Every time they had a bad king, things went downhill, and God did not bless the nation. And both nations were overtaken by their enemies because there was bad leadership going on. And so everything rises and falls. Nothing happens, in fact, unless someone takes the lead. I'll give you a couple of other examples. In your business, not everything rises and falls on leadership, that's for sure. There's a business, there's location, but even with location, we'll say of a restaurant, the leader will pick out the best location. Sometimes he can make a mistake, but he'll pick out a better location. A small group, you look at your small groups, the ones that are going the best, at least internally, as far as fellowship, they have great leadership. Those, maybe they're not growing numerically because of their age group right now and what's going on in the community, and of course during COVID as well, and other things that are going on around us. And you say, well, they're not going well numerically, but at the same time, there's the internal growth of those people. That's good leadership. And when you don't have good leadership, things begin to kind of fall apart just a little bit. And so your ministry and sphere of influence will never grow beyond your ability to lead. Now, let's look at a method that Jesus used. Jesus spent the maximum amount of time with those who could bear the greatest responsibility of ministry. Who were they? Well, they were the 12 disciples. In fact, when you look at it, remember the Mount of Transfiguration. Peter, James, and John went up with Jesus by themselves. Now you can imagine what the other 9 were thinking. Why Peter, James, and John all the time? Jesus is just showing favorites. And oh man, it'd just be isn't it a terrible thing for a leader to be said he plays favorites? Well, let's put this maybe on some other kind of scale. What about basketball? Many of you remember the great Michael Jordan and what a great player he was. Well, for example, Phil Jackson was the coach during all those championship years. And suppose they called timeout. The championship game was there, and they were behind by 1 point. They needed 1 basket to win the game. So you get the picture. Win or lose a championship. The Chicago fans there with the Chicago Bulls were just cheering, and they were nervous and biting their fingernails over this whole thing. And so Phil Jackson gets over there and draws up a play for Michael Jordan, the greatest player, in most people's opinion at least, the greatest player to ever play in the NBA. And somebody says, wait a minute, coach, can I ask you something? He says, sure. He says, it's my turn. I haven't had a chance to play yet. The game's almost over, and I haven't taken one shot. And Phil Jackson says, man, I'm so sorry. I just can't believe it. I overlooked you. Okay, let's redraw the play. And we want this guy, the 12th guy on our team, to get out on the court for the first time, and we're going to let him take the shot. And everybody says, oh, that's fair. That's so much fair. Fair to who? Well, it's really not fair to Michael Jordan necessarily, because that's where he excels. And so he's not getting the opportunity to excel at his major talent. Not fair to the coach, because Phil Jackson would have been fired for that. Not fair to the rest of the team who has worked all season long to get to that point to win. And not fair to the fans at all. So you got to pick and choose as a leader who you're going to be fair to. No, you would pick Michael Jordan for the shot because he has the best chance of making it. See, it's not a matter of playing favorites. You know that you have a stewardship of a ministry, whether it's your business, whether it's your small group class, or a pastor of a church. You have a stewardship. You've got to be able to mold that ministry or that business into the most successful entity that you can make within, of course, proper ethics. And so to do that, you want to invest in your best people, those who are fat. You want to invest in fat people. You've heard this before. F, faithful. A, available. And T, teachable. Those people that raise up in that talent area, and it's good for their talent, you want to make sure they have the opportunity to excel. And when they do, you're going to have the opportunity as a leader to excel as well. This takes what? It takes some planning. It takes some delegation. It takes some training. So John Maxwell has done a great job on breaking down Moses and how he became a leader and the day that he became the leader. Now, let me just read you a couple of verses here. It's right there in your curriculum. It says that when ministers decide to be leaders, they cross an important line. They no longer are judged only by what they can do themselves, but their value now depends mainly on what they can get done through others. You look at Exodus chapter 18, and you see verses like Moses' father-in-law really said to him, why are you doing all this? What was he talking about? Moses was trying to judge the whole nation. Thousands of people were coming to him. And they were saying, so-and-so did this. They crossed the borderline. They came on my property. We're fighting over this property. We're fighting over this legal matter. And he was trying to judge everything. And so his father-in-law came around and said, look, what you need to do is train people. You first break them into thousands, and then those thousands into hundreds, and those thousands into tens. Kind of reminds you of something, doesn't it? Maybe the church. You have a big crowd in the beginning, but then you break them down into departments, in small groups, maybe 3 or 4 classes per department, and then finally just the class. And so you train these leaders to take care of the things that they can take care of. And you can read that passage, by the way, in Exodus 18 right there in your outline. But Moses changed a few things. He changed 2 things as I see this. Moses changed the way that he was thinking. He was the super pastor before, if I can use that illustration. He was kind of the super pastor. He could leap his pulpit with a single bound. He went to the hospitals and everybody looked and said, oh, there comes Pastor Moses. He's coming down the hall, and he gets back to the church and he says, I visited the hospital the other day. Mrs. Smith was in the hospital, and I visited her and I prayed for her. And she got miraculously healed. And before I left the hospital, I led 3 nurses and 2 doctors to the Lord. And everybody's going, ooh, I can't go to the hospital. I can't do that. Boy, let's just call the super pastor every time we need something. No, he had to delegate things. And delegating means also you share some of the glory and share some of the credit as well. I remember years ago, after I've been teaching this for a couple of years, we had a lady come in to our Christmas Eve service right at the end of the service. We're all about ready to go home. And she said, where's so-and-so? And I said, it was a staff member. And I said, I think he's gone home. I haven't seen him. And she says, oh, she had a bunch of cookies. I mean, they were smelling so good, if you know what I'm saying. Chocolate chip cookies, freshly made. And she said, oh, okay, well, then you can have these. And I knew what she was saying. Here's this other guy had ministered to her, and I had to share the credit with him. and he got the credit, and he was going to get the cookies if he had been there on, still been there. But here's what we have to do. We have to split it up. We have to not only go recruit people to help us, but here's the thing, you've got to train them in such a way that they will not only be competent in what they're doing, but depending on what they're doing, they have to do things according to what the vision, the mission, the parameters of the church or the business really is. You don't want to just dump on someone, say go and do this job, and then they go off and they don't even do it anywhere near like you wanted it done. It's been said that if you can recruit someone and train someone to do what you would do 80% of the time, in other words, they pretty much get it. They would make the same decisions that you make as an 80% rule, then it's time to delegate, all right? When you've got something that you can delegate, you need to delegate it because there's only a certain amount of things that you can do, then you need to do it as a leader. And as you delegate other things out, you have to take on some new things that are very crucial, very important. And so he changed not only the way he was thinking, but also the way that he worked as well. And again, the person, here's the key, the person has to do it within the parameters of what your ministry, what your Sunday school class, small group, what your business, what your family is all about. I remember years ago, we built a building and we had this workroom and then we had these beautiful white cabinets, brand new. I mean, they were new. We had just opened the building. And so it was during the summer, I took off vacation for a week and got back. I put somebody in charge and I got back and oh man, there was an uproar. The ladies who had designed that room and designed the building as far as the furnishings were really upset at the staff member because he took all the doors off the cabinets. Why? Because he couldn't tell what was inside the cabinets. So he just ordered them, just take them off. Didn't ask me, didn't ask the people who did it. And he was doing something that I wouldn't do. Not that I wouldn't necessarily take the doors off. We put the doors back on and just, we just simply put on the outside little stickers what was on the inside. Very simple solution. But the last thing I would have done is to do something like that right after someone in our church had already designed them. So you have to do things within the parameters and you have to train people to do that, to have your mind, to have your heart on what's going on. So Moses made 7 major changes to become a leader based on the 2 changes I just shared with you. First of all, he became a man of prayer. He began to pray, and God would help him take his father-in-law's advice. Secondly, he committed himself to communication. We can see this in verse 20. Now, how hard is that? It's hard. It's hard to communicate. The old saying, you've taken the courses maybe before, and they've said, well, there's 4 aspects of communication. There's what you think you said. There's what you actually said. They're different. There's what people heard, what you think they heard, and then what they really did hear. And finally, I guess a 5th one, what they think they heard. So 4 or 5 different aspects of all the communication, and it can be missed. I remember being an intern at the First Baptist Church of Atlanta, Georgia, back when I was in college. And as I was an intern there, the education minister wanted to train me up, and he said, I'm going to let you teach the teachers on Wednesday night. So I remember the first time I did it, I was teaching the Sunday school lesson, and it was in the book of Genesis. And as I began to teach that, a lady started asking questions, and she started communicating back. I guess, looking back on it, I didn't know, I was young. She was just trying to kind of impress me, maybe, as a student, how much she had studied and was really ready for the class that night. But she kept talking about Henry Morris. Now, Henry Morris, by the way, is a scholar. He's a great guy, and he really knew a lot about the book of Genesis. But she kept quoting him. Well, that's not a source that I studied, so I didn't really know what he really said, or maybe she was misinterpreting sometimes what he was really saying. And so she said something, well, Dr. Morris said this, which was contrary to what I said. And I wanted to kind of move on by this time. Halfway through the class, she and I were kind of doing almost a dialogue. And I said, well, I think Dr. Morris maybe kind of missed it this time. And her eyes got this big, and she couldn't believe it. she was immediately silent. And you could tell her face got red as a beet. And there was silence in the class. And I learned very early, you just keep on going, you just keep on teaching, smile on your face, you try to concentrate on what you're teaching, even though you know there's an elephant in the room. Well, after class, she came immediately up to me. These other people were talking to me, and she came immediately up to me and she said, "How can you say that Henry Morris is a communist?" And I said, "Whoa." I said, you said that. You said, "He's communistic." And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "He kind of missed it." So you see the whole miscommunication. She says, "Oh," and she was relieved. But a few years later, I went back, and it was funny. She came up to me and she said, "Well, I guess you remember me, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do. I remember the whole incident." And even to this day, communication is so difficult. He became someone who worked on the communication. He also laid out a vision. We can see this in verse 20. He was about the statutes and the law, make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. And so then he laid out the vision, verse 20, "You shall warn them about the statutes and the law, and make them know the way in which where you need to go." And so Moses was the one who was casting the vision, and we'll get back to that in a lesson near the end of the study. And so then he developed a plan, again in verse 20. In number 5, he selected and trained leaders. Now he selected them and then he trained them. Very important, 2 steps. He released them into ministry. He allowed them to minister on their own. Not that he didn't keep them accountable. He just didn't abdicate responsibility. He trained them. He stayed with them. And then finally, he only did what he could do. So important as a leader. There's certain things that you'll find that you simply must do. And you train these next 2 blanks, train and delegate. Take on something else before you give it up. And so what that means is simply this. Some people, and I've known pastors to do this as well, they'll delegate everything and they'll just sort of keep up with kind of what's going on and never do anything new. Man, they could do their job in one day. Every Monday come in and check on everybody and just leave for the rest of the week. The reason you want to delegate because there's certain things that God has called you to do. If it's in the business world and you say, "Man, I really got to expand this. I really got to do something else," then that's what you need to do, and only you can do that. And so let's look then at the value, the next little section here, the value of a leader. What a leader has to do. A leader casts the vision for the organization. CrossLife's vision is to share the gospel of Jesus wherever we live, work, and play and go, that the sun will not set on the ministry of CrossLife Church. Now, that's our vision. We talk about that. I've talked about that recently. We talk about the mission of the church. That is what we do every day as well. And so a leader has to do this. If you have a vision based upon, of course, our vision as a church and our mission statement as a church, you have a part of that. You said, "This is what our class needs to do." And as a deacon, as a teacher, this is what, this is our part of this. Then you have to communicate that constantly as a leader. A leader also communicates that vision to the people, what I just said. And so you have the vision, you form it, and then you communicate it. Now, the vision, as I've said before, and we'll say again, is based upon what's your purpose as an organization, and then what's keeping you from accomplishing that purpose. The vision is how to overcome those obstacles in order to accomplish the purpose. So the vision of the church ought to just be obvious to people. The vision of your business, not so obvious, but it should be obvious to the people at the top where the real leaders are. So then you constantly communicate that. You're kind of the only one that can do that. Then thirdly, a leader will engineer change. It has to happen. The ideas may come from the lowest levels in an organization, but the leader must take the leadership in making those kind of changes. And we have another lesson for that. Then a leader will attract other leaders. And I know this to be true. You look around and sometimes I'm so shocked at the great leadership we have in our church. The leaders, not only as they inspire us and lead, in our church, but also how they lead out in the business world, how they lead at the university, how they lead in the corporate world. They're big time leaders, and they come here to church and they take their leadership skills and abilities and they apply them to the ministry. Number 5, a leader will inspire and motivate. That's one thing a manager can inspire, needs to a certain point. He does need to motivate, but the leader, that leader at the top, must inspire and motivate more than anybody else. In fact, he's inspiring and motivating the managers as they inspire everybody else. Then number 6, a leader will bring to bear the necessary resources. Here's something. If you are deficient in your leadership skills, if you need to grow in that, one of the ways it's going to tell is that, number 1, people are not going to be inspired by what you have to say, and therefore, if they're not inspired, you're not going to be able to bring about the investors, bring about the givers, say it's a nonprofit. You're not going to be able to bring those resources together because people must believe in the leader before they believe in the vision. You can cast a vision all you want. If they don't believe that you can do it, they're not going to invest in it. Number 7, a leader will add value to the lives of people. We've seen this so many times. And one of the reasons why people are willing, we'll say, some people are willing to follow me is because I stand in the pulpit every week and I give a message. I'm faithful in coming and I'm faithful in delivering God's word, whether you like the delivery or not. It is God's word. And so one of the things I've discovered in small groups, and not picking on anybody or anything, just an observation, we used to have in our church classes that would have one teacher. And that teacher would have a tremendous amount of influence over the people in his class. We could engineer a change in our church and let the leaders know about it, let the small group leaders know about it, and immediately everybody else would just catch fire with it. The problem now is sometimes we're so busy in life, and we are busy. We have 3 or 4 teachers in a class. Now, on the one hand, you maybe feel like you're getting better teaching because everybody has a whole month to really pull their illustrations together, pull their lessons together. But on the other hand, you don't have a chance as a teacher to pour into the lives of people week in and week out. And when you don't have that opportunity, you're just not going to have the influence, because in order to have influence over someone, you have to add value to people's lives. Then number 8, a leader will establish a healthy growth atmosphere. In fact, let me just say, a leader establishes the atmosphere, period. A dad goes home, he should be the spiritual leader of the home. He walks in, bad day at work, all the kids are running around, the wife is just waiting for him to get home, to a little relief. He comes in with a great attitude, atmosphere of the whole home changes, and everything's great. He comes in with a bad attitude, the atmosphere of the home is bad. And so you establish the atmosphere. Then number 9, a leader will be several steps ahead of the pack, but not too far. In other words, you'll be thinking, your vision, your thinking, the possibilities that you're thinking about in ministry, how to handle problems, will be out there ahead of the pack, ahead of the congregation, or ahead of your group, but not too far. One of the problems we have in new ministry, making changes as pastors, we expect that when we go off at a conference and we come back, everybody is sort of feel the same way we do about the conference over one sermon. We preach one sermon, all of a sudden everybody ought to jump on board. That's about like asking someone to stand across the room, we'll say 20 steps, and call them up and say, hey, stand right here beside me. And they start walking and say, oh, no, don't walk here. I want you to leap here all in one step and just be standing right beside me. Well, that's a ridiculous thing. But when we try to change things in a church, oftentimes we expect people just to jump on board. All of a sudden, one step, one giant leap, when most people want to just simply take one step at a time. And the only way they're going to take that one giant leap, they'll be saying under their breath, I don't think this is going to work. But I trust the leader. And if he's for it, I'm going to give it a shot. Okay? Number 10, a leader embraces the responsibility of leadership. If you don't want it, no amount of training is really going to help. You have to take the initiative for that. In 1 Peter chapter 5, it says to us, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, but with eagerness, not yet as lording it over those allotted in your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. And so let me just close out this little section right here by saying this. According to John Maxwell, four risks people take in following me or following you. Number one, do I know where I'm going? Okay, nobody wants to follow somebody that doesn't know where they're going. And so that has to do with vision. Number two, should you go with me? That's unity. You feel like, okay, that's where I want to go. That's what I believe in too. I believe in evangelism. I believe in discipleship. I believe in missions. That's where I want to go. Number three, will I succeed? Do I have the ability? That's competence. And you're wondering, again, can I buy into the leader? I buy into the vision. I believe in that. But can he really get us there? Number four, will I do to you what leaders have done to you in the past? Now, what is that? Well, that is basically a matter of trust. Am I going to build a big building, for example, and then leave you with the debt? Am I going to say, this is the vision, and all of a sudden I'm gone? And so are you going to get burned? So those four things that you ask of me, but they also ask of you. Those people are following you, ask in their subconscious mind the same four questions. And so, what are the characteristics then of a good leader? Well, first of all, a leader, this is important, a leader needs to be a follower. If you don't know what it's like to follow, then you cannot identify with those who are following you. If there's something going on, and a rebel teaches rebellion, and that's the problem. So you can't reward someone that's rebelling and I want to do my own thing. Somebody says, well, this is my class. I'm not going to teach those lessons. This is my class. Well, okay, we want you to have ownership, but let's look at it this way. If you had a Bible study in your home without our church members there, you recruited the whole group from your neighborhood, then we might suggest things that you could teach if you ask, but hey, that's your Bible study. But when you teach at our church, who are you teaching? Well, you're teaching our members. You're teaching people that we gave you to teach. You did not necessarily recruit them, even though maybe a few. And then also you are teaching in our classroom. And so because of all that, you have ownership. It is your class, but at the same time, it's a joint ownership with the church and of course with God. And so all of us have to be around together. And if people look at you and say, he's rebelling, guess what's going to happen? They're going to rebel against you too. All right? So, two, a leader needs to have a consistent walk with God. You've got to have a character behind the competency. And you may have all the competency and you may be able to get it done, but if you are not ethically there, or you tell somebody, hey, I'm a witness for Christ, and yet you don't witness. If you say to somebody they ought to be giving to the church, but you're not tithing. If you say, for example, I have a quiet time every day, but you really don't, or they should have a quiet time every day, and you don't even read the Bible, then you can see that the character is not consistent with what you're envisioning people to do. All right, number three, a leader, a quality leader, needs to be a learner. Rick Warren has said, if you stop learning, you cease to be a leader. Now, here's what happens on a lot of pastors, and I just look at that point of view because I know so many pastors. That's the circles I run in, but I'm sure the same is true in the business world. You start off, leadership, maybe theology, the Bible, whatever, you know your business, that dry cleaning business up one side and down the other, that computer business, great example. The computer business, how the computer works, the Windows, the mouse, the Apple, whatever it is. You know how it works, but you cease to learn. New things come out all the time. So now the people that are working for you know more than you do. I had a friend of mine that graduated from the University of Georgia that I went to school with, and he finished in business, and I transferred to a college in order to study the ministry. But I met up with him years later, and he was saying, he's in the banking business. He started off, he knew all this, he climbed the ladder. He said, I'm a vice president of a large bank now, and I work with people who know more things than I do, and I'm just faking it every day. So he has anxiety because he knows sooner or later, when he gets maybe into his 50s and 60s, some of these other people are going to leap over him because he ceased to be a learner. You have to keep on learning. A leader then, number 4, needs to be an example. It needs to be somebody willing to pay the price, not a person that says, you go and do this, you go and show up and minister to the homeless this Saturday, but I won't be there. That kind of thing. You never want to ask people to do something you're unwilling to do yourself, and sooner or later, they're going to have to see you doing it. When we planted a church, and I identify so much with our mission churches that we're supporting, because I planted a church in Atlanta, and every single Saturday, I showed up along with a few other guys to set up for Sunday morning, setting up the chairs. When I went to college and seminary, and when I had to set up some chairs, I knew exactly how to do it because I had already done it as a church planter. Now, that doesn't mean that as a pastor, that's what you do all the time. You have to do what you have to do. I go to all the many of the functions here at the church, like all the kids' functions, and if they need somebody to help with the dart throw or whatever, the ball throw, whatever, I'll do that. But I realize, too, that I need to be out among the people. I need to be shaking hands. I need to be meeting and greeting people. There's not too many people that can go up to our guests and say, oh, I'm the pastor of the church. No, I'm the only one that can do that. And then very few people with their kids running around are going to stop and share Christ with someone. And so I feel like that is more my job. But I have done all that before, and I'm willing to do that as well. Don't ask people to give unless you're willing to give. Don't ask people to read the Bible unless you're reading the Bible. Number 5, a leader needs to be a servant. He needs to have a servant's heart. In one of the scriptures, Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28, it says, but Jesus called them to himself and said, you know the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It is not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to become first among you shall be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. What does that mean? That means you sacrifice for others. That means you put others ahead of yourself. It doesn't mean necessarily that you go and mow their grass every week. It doesn't mean that you take them meals every week. But a servant's heart means in decisions that are made, you're going to put those who follow you and their needs ahead of your own. You're going to have that servant spirit, humble spirit. Number 6, a leader must communicate. We've already gone over that. You've got to learn to do that. You've got to learn to even ask the question, hey, what did we just say? What did we decide on? And next, a leader must equip, this is lastly, a leader must equip others for ministry and leadership. There's a difference, again, between ministering and leading ministers. So on that 1 to 10 scale, where are you exactly? Well, I want to, finish this up when I say I think. And I'm going so fast. This is it. The making of a leader. Last thing. All right. First of all, understand the value of leadership. Do you see it? Everybody leads something. You're leading your family right now. Are you the leader in the home that you need to be? Are you leading your family in the way they should go? Do they follow you? You're a leader at work. Hey, you're working under somebody. You're in the middle maybe somewhere, but you're also leading a group of people as well. You come to church, you don't lead anywhere else. Maybe you're retired and you really don't lead much anywhere, but you can lead here at church. So make a commitment to learn to lead, because being a leader is going to cost you. Now, what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you time. It's true. I'm spending time right now teaching you. But there's going to cost more than that kind of time. If you're going to really train someone in leadership, it will say to replace yourself maybe one day as a deacon or as a small group leader. You're going to have to sort of go on their timetable sometimes. It's just like when your children are growing up. they're on your timetable. But when they become teenagers, become young adults of their own, you're on their timetable. Once they get that driver's license, you have to figure out when they're going to be at home in order to be there. Well, when you're going to the hospitals to visit, train somebody how to visit the hospitals, when you are in a meeting or something and you figure, I really need to train this person how to lead, when can they make it? It takes an investment of time. It takes changes in your life. Instead of doing everything yourself, instead of being maybe that perfectionist, that person that says, man, I just want to make sure that I get everything just right. You may have to be satisfied with 80%. It's going to take some changes. It's going to take misunderstandings because you cannot communicate perfectly. There's misunderstandings, and you can't, let me just say this, you can't lead if you have to be liked. If you're a person who says, I just have to be loved. I just have to be loved. And I've known people like that. They can't lead, they can't make the tough decisions. They can't replace somebody in a position because they have to, that person's not going to love them anymore. They have to be loved. I want to be loved. But I learned a long time ago, I don't have to be loved. And if I have to be loved, then I can't lead. And then D, friends. Sometimes, most of the time, in fact, I think it's lonely at the top. Now, some people would take issue with that and say, oh no, you want to have a lot of friends around you and everything, even when you're at the top. And so even in a church setting, you become the most successful small group here. Other people are going to look at you as we give you as the example. They're going to look at you and say, man, I'm working just as hard as him. So you've got to be willing to sacrifice those kinds of things. And so here's my challenges to you. First of all, start to lead somebody. Start to lead somebody, all right? If a person, Earl Nightingale said, if a person will spend 1 hour a day on the same subject for 5 years, that person will become an expert on that subject. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in leadership, but years ago, when I was pastoring in Atlanta, I was frustrated. I couldn't get the thing going off 200 or 300 people. We had a couple hundred people. I couldn't get it going past that. I didn't know really how to delegate. And so I subscribed to a leadership tape of the month club. And I listened to those every single month for years. And it really had an effect on my life. After a couple of years, I couldn't even remember where I heard stuff. It was just there. And so it becomes part of your DNA as you go to think through things. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. It's great. And then I want to ask you to start adding value to someone's life right now. You say, well, I don't know who to lead. Then just start adding value to people's lives. Teach them the Bible. Teach them how to do something. When they look to you, they say, well, who do I go for advice? Who do I go to help me? Oh, I'm going to call on so-and-so. That shows that you are helping people. David Jeremiah, a great pastor out in Southern California, said successful people are successful because they add value to people's lives. Great quote. I'd like to pray for you right now. Next week, we're going to look at actually mentoring or modeling the way as we mentor people, modeling the way and how we should walk. That's next week. But right now, I'd like to pray for you. God, thank you so much for this time that we have met together. I pray, God, that even though it's been a little bit rapid, been a lot of material, I pray that people will maybe even listen, the listeners will listen again to this, this message, this study, fill in all the blanks and start learning what they need to do. Allow it to get into their DNA of their thinking so they can become better leaders. When they become better leaders, it will determine the impact that we have in the world around us. And so, Lord, I pray for our leaders in our own church, those who also would be leaders. We need leaders. We've determined as staff, that's one of the things we're in constant need of. And so, Lord, I pray that you would raise up people to do the work of the ministry and then lead others who are doing that work. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.